Hey, welcome back everybody. Today is verb day. We're going to be focusing on the past progressive and the simple past, and specifically with how to use these tenses with when and while. So if we've never met before, my name is Sharon. I'm so glad that you're here studying with me today. This particular lesson, I can't even tell you how many times I've taught it before. So let's get right to it. All right. I'll bring myself back up. Okay. So past progressive and simple past. First, let's start with how do they look differently? What is the form? So with past progressive, you have was or were plus verb with ing. So I want to point out that was and were, remember this is a be verb. It's just be in the past tense. And then you have any verb plus ing. The mistake that I often see students make when they're using past progressive is they'll forget the be. They'll say, I reading yesterday. And that's not correct. The form, we'll continue with past progressive. So we use past progressive to talk about actions that happened over a period of time in the past. So take a look at that word progressive. Do you see the word progress? So whenever you hear about present or future progressive or past progressive, you should be thinking about actions that happen over a period of time. So my example, I was reading yesterday. If I were to draw that out, it would look like this. So this is the past, this is the present, this is the future. So our action, I was reading, happened in the past over a period of time. I was reading. There you go. All right, so it happens over a period of time. It's not like the verb give. You give and it's done. So we usually say I gave. Sometimes we can say I was giving, but it's all about meaning, and we'll talk more about that. So think about actions that happen over a period of time. Those actions are going to often be in the progressive. We also use past progressive to describe scenes. And at the end of this video, I'll tell you about another video that you can watch where I tell you a story and I use the simple past and the past progressive. And that will show the describing scenes point. We also use past progressive to describe actions that were happening when another action interrupted it. And I'll show you examples of that on the next slide. Simple past, students usually like it because it's not that hard to remember. A regular verb, you just take the verb and you add ed. The difficult part is irregular verbs, okay? And with irregular verbs, you just have to memorize them. In the links for the link in the description of this video, I'll share with you a set of Quizlet cards where you can study your irregular past tense verbs. We use simple past to talk about facts in the past. So let me graph out what that looks like. So I could say something about my past. When I was 16, I worked as a cashier, which is true, at Target, the red Walmart, as some of my students remember it. So worked. That's just a fact about the past. And this is where a point where some of my students get confused because they say, but you worked for a period of time. And I'm like, right, but I'm just telling you a fact about the past. I'm not telling a story. I'm not describing a scene. All I want to say is something that's true about the past. We use it to talk about actions that ended in the past. We use it to specifically for non-progressive or stative verbs. These are verbs that do not often happen in the progressive because it doesn't really make sense for them to be in the progressive. And I will have links in the video description to show you more examples of them. I have some on the next slide, the most common ones that I think you should know. So think about these verbs. Love, like, hate, believe, doubt, need, want, have, see, seem, be. All of these verbs, we don't just do them and they're finished, right? We can, when you think about the meaning of these verbs, they happen over a period of time, right? So that's how I want you to think about verbs. There's not always a 100% rule for how you use a verb. It depends on what do you want to say, what do you mean. All right, so now let's look at how we use when and while with these tenses. What's the difference between these words? What do they mean? And which tense do we use with either of them? Always remembering that we have to think about what we want to say. What do we mean? There's not a 100% rule all the time, but some combinations of when, while, and our tenses can get confusing. So when means at that time. All right, so think about that, at. At has that idea of at this point, right? At that time. While means during that time. So again, we see that idea of ongoingness with during. Okay. So for example, when the rain stopped, we took a walk. So what does that look like in your head? I'm going to graph it out for you so you can kind of see. So I'll even make it a little bit bigger. Okay. So we have one action happened and then another action happened. Which action happened first? Stopped or took? Stop. Stopped happened first and then took. Okay. So when we often use with the simple past. So I'll write that over here. Not always, but often. Okay. On the other hand, while I was grading, Jerry left for the meeting. So what does this make us think? So I'll graph it out for you here. It makes us think grading over a period of time, and while I was doing that, she left. And this was grading. Okay, so it's this idea that something was going on and something interrupted it. Okay, so there's my description of these, how these are used. One action happened, then another action happened when we have simple past with when. So we have simple past here, simple past here. This one we had past progressive with while. Let me circle my when too. And this is in the dependent clause. This is also dependent. This is independent. This part here. And in our independent clause here, we have simple past. So with me so far. While we often see past progressive in the dependent clause, with when we often see simple past. But you might be wondering, is it ever possible to have past progressive in both of the clauses? So let me contrast a couple examples here. While I was sleeping, the phone rang. Okay. While I was walking to the bus stop, it started to rain. Both of these describe an activity that was in progress when another activity happened. So this one was sleeping, right? And then what happened? The phone rang. Same here. Was walking, started to rain. But now look at these two sentences. While I was sleeping, it was snowing. I was listening to music while he was paying the bills. So if I were to draw these out, it would look like this. So maybe the first one is was sleeping. And remember, these are happening over at the same time. I have them at different points just to show difference, but they're really happening at the same time. Okay. So it's that idea that when we have both of those verbs in the past progressive, they're both ongoing in the past. All right, so now I have a series of sentences for you to look at. We have 6 sentences and I have 3 possible answers down here. So pause the video for a minute and think about, let me bring that up for you. Think about which example each of these numbers, each of these sentences is. So take a minute. All right, hopefully that was enough time for you. Or if you pause the video, like I said. All right, so here we go. While I was washing dishes, I dropped a plate. So this one is B. Oh, sorry. I don't know why that button keeps doing that. B. While I was eating, someone knocked on my door. This is also B. Again, past progressive and then simple past, right? While I was sleeping, it was snowing. Oh, yes. Past progressive, past progressive. So this one is different. This one is A. Okay. She raised her hand while the teacher was talking. Simple past. Past progressive. Does it matter if it comes first or second? It doesn't matter. If you have your dependent clause first or if you have it second, it still means the same thing. I could say while the teacher was talking, she raised her hand, and it means the same thing. So this one again is an example of B. When the phone rang, I answered it. Simple past, simple past. So this one is C. One action happened, then another action happened. All right, finally we have rang and was studying. Any thoughts? So this one is, again, B. All right, so that was some good practice. The next step is to go watch The Book Bag, listening practice 2. I'm going to be telling you a story using simple past and past progressive. And so it'll be a little listening practice, and it'll also be recognizing verb tenses within a story. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.